Hello. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Can I get some sort of indication that that's all fine? I haven't had a chance to connect yet. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Just going to be sharing my screen. All right. Fantastic. Just want to check if anyone can jump on and just let me know that they can see the slides okay. My name is Cristiano, and I head up YouthInsight, which is a full-service research agency focused on young people. Very honoured to be here. It's very exciting to be able to share some of the insights of our research that we've been conducting over the last 4 years. Before I get into the actual insights, I thought I owed everyone a bit of an introduction about who we are. Sorry, my apologies. I'm just not entirely sure that everyone is following with my slides. Cool. All right. So someone's given me an okay. Apologies for this. I'm not really familiar with this platform, so I'll continue on. So Student Edge. So I head up YouthInsight, the full service research arm of Student Edge. And we support a range of clients, government, industry bodies, corporations, and charities to understand how they're positioned in the minds of young people and how to improve their engagement and communication with this cohort. Student Edge is Australia's largest youth membership organisation with around 1.2 million members across the country. Our core mission is supporting young people make more informed and life career decisions by supporting with a whole range of different information and a range of benefits with a free membership offering. Everything we do is centered around our 3 core pillars, which is helping young people save, earn, and learn. A little bit of a background about what I want to take everyone through today. We've been lucky enough to get involved or be commissioned by the Australian government to conduct the Youth in STEM research, and this is going to be very much based around that study. It was commissioned by the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources in Australia, and it's a 10-year tracking study among young people aged 12 to 25 and their key influencers, parents, teachers, and to a smaller extent, career advisors. The study started off tracking only 12 to 25-year-olds, so that was the first 2 ways, and we quickly realised that it was equally important to get a 360 view of the influence as well, to really understand the reasons why young people are choosing certain subjects and certain careers, obviously with the focus on understanding more around STEM. We were lucky enough in 2020 to replicate the study in the Philippines in collaboration with Unilab Foundation and the Philippines Business Coalition for Women Empowerment, PBCWE. And the ultimate goal, what we're trying to do here, is understand the attitudes and perceptions of young people towards STEM skills and careers with a particular lens on females, with the ultimate objective of trying to close that gender gap in the STEM arena. So in terms of a very quick background from the research process, all the surveys were conducted online, around 15 to 20 minutes. With the youth in STEM component, we spoke to young people aged 12 to 25, and that was a nationally representative sample of 3,000 people in Australia, 1,500 in the Philippines. And in terms of the influencer group, it was parents of primary and secondary school children, a sample of 1,500, and teachers, career advisors of primary and secondary school, a sample of 850. We did speak to a small component of tertiary educators as well. However, because at this later stage, most of the decisions have been made and attitudes are more concrete at that age, the idea was to focus more on a younger age group where there's still a big chance for us to understand the decision-making process and the reasons why these attitudes are formed. So what I'm going to do, I've split the insights into three different sections. The first one is around focusing on Gen Z. Then we'll have a look at parents, and we'll have a look at teachers in the end. One of the key metrics that we've been tracking over time is an understanding of STEM. Now, there's lots of different ways that we could go about understanding STEM. Obviously, as an integrated set of skills. And actually understanding what the acronyms stand for. In this case, it's more about the proportion of young people that can spell out the 4 subjects that make up the acronym. We found that 58% of people in Australia were able to correctly identify all 4 subjects, and this didn't really change over the first 2 tracking waves. 19% had provided incorrect responses, and 23% simply weren't sure. Surprisingly, parents was slightly less likely than young people to correctly identify all 4 subjects in Australia, with 25% giving it a go, but getting it wrong, and 23% just outright saying they didn't know. I guess less surprisingly and encouragingly, the majority of teachers were able to identify what the term were all 4 subjects, with only a small component of 9% getting it incorrect and 4% saying they're not sure. When we compared these results with the Philippines, it was really surprising to see that 81% of young Filipino people were able to correctly identify the 4 subjects, almost as high as the Australian teachers, with only 7% giving it a wrong answer and 12% unsure. When we delved a little bit deeper into the results of those who got that question right compared to those who got it wrong, from a demographic point of view, we saw that there was a higher proportion of females that were able to identify all 4 subjects. It was also driven a little bit higher by young people aged 12 to 21 compared to 22 to 25, so 66% compared to 45. And something that is quite important for us in Australia is to also address some of these gaps from metro and regional areas. So there's a higher disposition towards STEM and confidence around STEM metro areas, and that also translates in terms of awareness, 60% compared to 52%. What's been really interesting tracking these studies over time is that every time we ask this question, engineering seems to be the subject that trips most people up in terms of spelling out the acronym, and the whole list there is given of separate subjects that's put into place. What's interesting about that is that when we ask them to spell out the acronym, engineering is a subject that trips most people up. However, when we ask them about jobs associated with STEM, it was engineering that actually comes up at the top. So when we ask them specifically about the 4 subjects, people can't really, majority can, but the E trips most people up. However, as an integrated set of skills, people do associate engineering directly with jobs associated in that space. And that was across both countries. So in Australia, it was engineering, scientists, teaching, mathematician, and IT roles. And it wasn't just flat out these this was an open-ended question, and they didn't specifically say engineering and scientists. They gave us a whole range of specific types of jobs. So in engineering is everything from biomedical engineer, chemical, civil. Hello?
I'm here. Just keep going. I was just making sure that you were presenting because we didn't see you backstage.
Oh, okay. Can you guys see my presentation?
Oh, yes, we can. So this is great. We're just so thrilled to have you here. So yay. All right, you keep going and I'll come back in at the end.
All right, terrific. Thanks so much. And similarly in the Philippines. One thing to note here, and I will provide links at the end of this presentation so you can have a look at more information, was that in Australia, we didn't consider medical roles as part of the STEM definition, whereas in the Philippines we did. So we've got to just take that as a caveat when looking at these results. Moving forward, as I've already talked about, we wanted to also understand what influence young people to make the subject selections that they make. And I guess no surprise from what we've been talking about is that parents are the number one influencer for young people when deciding what subjects. 46% of them said that it's heavily reliant on mum and dad or guardians around what subjects they make. around what subjects they choose, and that was even higher amongst females, followed by teachers and friends. And if we scroll down to the bottom, we can see, although it's small, it's interesting to see that with famous peoples and celebrities, that resonated higher with males. And potentially from what we've been seeing, that's very much because of the lack of female role models in the STEM space. We also wanted to know about factors. So forgetting people for a moment, just general factors that influence subject selection. And personal interests and their own skills and abilities were by far the number one factors that they consider when choosing selection, which might sound intuitive that it goes above potential earnings, but we've been doing a lot of consulting around industry areas that are facing skill shortages in Australia. Mining and manufacturing are examples of those. And sometimes it's about just the message and dialing up and dialing down certain things that resonate stronger with young people. So earning a lot of money, yes, it's exciting, but nowhere near as important as aligning careers with personal interests and their own skills and abilities, especially around the conversation of transferable skills into the future. And you can see there on the right also that was much higher amongst females. Another key metric that we track over time is around interest in STEM. And then this is outright just a question how interested they are. And just by a quick glance at this slide, we can see that there's a significantly higher levels of interest in the Philippines around STEM compared to Australia across all subjects. But another thing I wanted to point out on this slide as well is that with the exception of science, across both markets, there's a higher interest. There's a higher interest amongst science is the only subject that has equal interest amongst males and females, whereas in technology, engineering, and maths all have significantly higher interest levels amongst males. So we start to see that gender gap unveiling here. Also, something that we've seen across all studies is that interest in science and technology, we'll have a look at confidence in a moment, is the highest, and engineering and maths seems to be the subjects within the STEM realm that fall behind. As I mentioned, then another really important metric that we're tracking over time is young people's confidence. Again, we can see the Philippines over indexes in confidence compared to Australia, which is great, or great for the Philippines, I guess. With science, again, being the subject that has equal levels of confidence with males and females. What's worrying and a bit of a theme in terms of the study is where engineering falls down significantly, especially in Australia, and especially if we go a little bit further and look at the gender breakdown. This is one of the key areas and one of the key barriers to young people, I guess, engaging with STEM and particularly with girls. But we wanted to go a little bit further, not just track this, but actually asking an open-ended question the reasons why they might not be confident. And we broke it down into the 4 subjects. So starting off with science, around 19% of people said they're not confident. There was a proportion of people that said they were not confident. They were either neither confident or unconfident, but the proportion of people that said, look, I'm really not confident in this, we asked them the reasons why. And we can see here on the left-hand side that we've coded these back, and the majority of people saying, look, I'm not very good at science, or about 1 in 10 said I'm not interested in it. But it's when we start to actually dive in and look at some of the actual responses that we can see there are some low-hanging fruit in terms of re-engaging some people, or at least trying to understand the reasons why they say that they're not good at it. And a lot of times from what I've been reading and speaking to young people is very much because one time back in year 7, I had a bad result, and they then categorically stay away from that. So some of these quotes, I don't feel confident because I don't properly understand the concepts and rules of science. I'm not really good at logical, critical thinking and reading the complex language of science, and I've never excelled in these subjects and avoided them in high school. So hopefully these are sort of areas that we could potentially more specifically address amongst these individual students. With technology, similar to what we'll see soon in maths, it seems a bit of a polarizing subject where people will categorically just say they're either good at it or not good at it. And again, a lot of the times it's based on It's based on anecdotal data that they've got. They couldn't update their software, or they're not very good at finding the features on their phones. So technology then becomes branded as something that they're not good at, and they don't entertain the idea of studying that. So some of the verbatims, some of the quotes, I don't know one thing to the next about technology as it's getting more advanced and harder for me to grasp. I'm not very good at programming, and it seems pretty confusing. So this is another example where people get fixated on a specific components of this subject area and then completely write it off. So that was another example. Engineering was obviously the biggest one of concern because they had the highest proportion of people saying that they're not confident. With on the left hand side here, we see again people not interested, or I don't study this, I don't understand anything about it. And this wasn't surprisingly in Australia because the subject isn't offered as a standard subject in high school, so that we expected awareness levels to be a lot lower. So, and the quotes back that up. I've never done anything related to engineering. I don't have the brains, as it's far out of my comfort zone, and I don't do this subject. And I don't do this subject, and you have to be very good at maths, and I don't like maths. So, I don't for one moment say that engineering is not a difficult subject, but possibly not to the extent that young people make it out to be. And there's also possible pathways that people could take to get the prerequisite skills that they need to actually understand a little bit more about it. But as the first thing that we've consulted back to the Australian government, it's really about creating some awareness around engineering and not looking at it just as a specific skill, but I guess as an integrated set of skills within STEM. Lastly was maths, and 33% of young people simply said, I'm not good at it. So people just either feel like they're a numbers person or they're not. And I guess that's possibly not even the case just with youth. We'd probably see that across our lives. I try my hardest and I'm only just below average. I find it extremely boring and would struggle to be motivated. And we saw that the interest levels actually in maths year on year in Australia have actually declined. And that's in line with the OECD results that we've been seeing, which is a test around 15-year-olds. Maths is definitely not doing so well in Australia. And then this person here saying past experience and it doesn't interest me. So again, another one of those examples where potentially you've had a bad teacher or you've had a bad year and now outright you will not go near maths. If you're interested later on to download the full study, we did ask what specific subjects that young people are looking to take across from year 8 all the way to year 12. I guess their senior years of high school, but we also asked them point blank in the study if they're considering studying STEM in the future. And I guess keeping with the theme of what we've been seeing with Philippines and Australia as comparisons, a high proportion of young Filipinos are looking to study STEM in the future compared to young Australians, and across both markets, again, it skews higher amongst males. So what are the reasons for not having intentions to study STEM further? Well, the majority of people said, look, it's either something not related to my career or I'm just not interested in these subjects. And that's, I guess, fair enough. There's probably a little bit of lack of awareness of how related it could be. But where I wanted to focus on was grouping a whole range of these different open-ended responses. And we realized that 66% of the responses of not having intentions to study STEM further was because they avoid further study because of a perceived lack of capability. And for me, this is the lowest hanging fruit in terms of re-engaging or trying to have a conversation with young people around the reasons why they feel lack of capability and what can we actually do to actually increase that confidence and therefore increase the intentions of studying studying STEM further in the future. And again, we see that skewing higher towards females. We also wanted to get a bit of a sense, and we've seen it obviously unveil organically in the results, but we wanted to ask specifically about young people if they believe that there is a gender superiority between males and females. And if we focus on Australia to start with, encouragingly, if we just look at this grey bar in the middle here, the majority of young people feel like that neither girls or boys are better at any of these subjects. However, we do see on the left-hand side there in the blue part of the bar that there is still a skew towards feeling that boys are better than girls in engineering, technology, and maths. And science is the only one that's actually quite balanced in Australia. So still a little bit of work to be done. And then if we focus on the right-hand side, although Philippines, young Filipino people had higher confidence and interest in STEM, what was interesting is that they also believe that there's a higher proportion of people that believe that there is a gender superiority and males are better than females in across all but science, where it actually flips in the Philippines, where they perceive that girls are better than boys in science. But it's crazy to see that almost half of young people in the Philippines believe that boys are better than at engineering and technology. And one of the key findings from the study in the Philippines is that in the early years, from year 8 all the way to, say, year 11, those results around confidence and interest were actually much higher. But it's when you got to year 12 and they started thinking about the higher education opportunities and career opportunities is where that gender gap started to show itself, and then aligning back to where the Australian results were at. But from a younger age, there was a lot more belief, there was a lot more confidence and interest with young girls and boys, almost comparable. Then, as I guess keeping with the theme, we asked them specifically, what about an intention of actually a STEM career as opposed to just talking about the studies? Around a third of young Australians have an intention to go into a role that's STEM related, with males over-indexing compared to females, 41% compared to 24%. The top 3 professions were business owner, and it's no surprise Gen Z are quite entrepreneurial, so the idea of perhaps becoming a Jeff Bezos one day is very alluring. Medical doctor and engineer. The main STEM jobs in Australia were engineer, IT, and scientists. Females tended to skew more towards medical and teaching roles, whereas in males were more of these STEM roles of engineering, IT, and business ownership. With in Philippines, the top professions were business owner, engineer, and programmer, computer programmer, with the main STEM jobs being engineer, programmer, medical doctor, and STEM educator. So then moving on into the parents and STEM, one of the things before we even got into analysing attitudes and perceptions and dialogue that they have with their children around STEM, it was interesting that just from the onset, from their own behaviours, from their own circumstances, the examples that they set as the main role models. So I thought it was important just to caveat this first section that parents' influence over their children's decisions starts from their own lived examples. And what we saw, I guess, just in the profiling part of the survey is that when we asked around what's the highest level of education, what sort of employment are you in, and the STEM qualifications, we saw that there was an over-indexing amongst fathers compared to females right from the onset. So 68% of fathers had a higher education qualification compared to 54% of mothers. 78% of fathers were employed in full-time work, with only 4% being stay-at-home parents, where we can see on the right-hand side there of that bar graph that only 32% of mothers had full-time jobs and 28% were stay-at-home parents. So not level playing fields right from the onset between genders, I guess, from a parent point of view. And the key one here really was around STEM qualifications. And there's double the amount of fathers who have a STEM qualification compared to mothers. And this really sets the scene for the next set of results and starts to paint a bit of a picture as to the influence that young people have from their biggest role models from even before leaving the house. We also asked parents about their top 10 professions that they wanted for their child to pursue. And encouragingly, 48% wanted their child to go into a STEM-related career, with the top 3 being computing, IT, engineer, and medical doctor. However, when we break this down and have a look at the STEM job preferences by parents, a higher proportion of fathers were likely to want their child to go into a STEM job compared to 40% of mothers. And interestingly, even when we look at parents of boys or males and parents of girls, a higher proportion of those were also more likely to want their child to undertake a STEM career compared to parents of females. So it really starts to tell a bit of a picture as to what the results that we've just seen with the Youth in STEM insights. I guess in a similar vein, when we looked at the highest level of education that they expect for their child, it was very high for both mums and dads, I guess. But when we contrast, 73% of fathers expect their child to have a higher education degree compared to 57% of mothers. Again, it just adds more context around those differences between mums and dads and guardians, of course. Pardon me. So continue on, that we've also wanted to make sure that there are some key tracking measures with the influencer research. So what we looked at here was their personal interest in the subjects and their confidence to support their child or children with STEM schoolwork. And without delving in specifically into each of the subjects, you can see at a glance here that there's a general higher interest among fathers and a much higher levels of confidence in supporting their children with STEM jobs. And if we look again, if we do look specifically at engineering, we can see that is where the biggest gap is between fathers and mothers. And again, it tells us a bit of a story as to the reasons why that might be the case for young people's perceptions around engineering as well. So we wanted to know a little bit more about, well, what can we do to help increase confidence to support your children with STEM work? And the top 4 results, and this was only amongst the people that said that they didn't have much confidence, they want more specific resources for parents, so something targeted at parents, and equally they want more instructions from the school about individual tasks, and this was slightly higher amongst mums than it was for dads. So very much crying out for help. Give me something that's specifically made for me, so that when I'm helping my child with science or maths homework, I've got something to lean on. As a parent of an 18-year-old as well, who is an absolute whiz at maths, I can completely appreciate where this is coming from, because I wouldn't know the first thing that of the homework that my son was going through in the later years of high school. 39% said that they want general STEM information from the school, and a lower proportion said that they would love to do a STEM short course. So a couple of ideas there around how we could start moving the needle in terms of this key influencer group. Another key metrics was around how important parents feel that STEM skills are to get good jobs in the future. And without really breaking it down and comparing, I think what was great about this is that the large majority see that STEM skills are necessary for employment in the future, and they recognise that, which is terrific. It does still skew male. Of the small proportion that said they didn't think it was important, 15% said, well, I don't think it's needed for all jobs. My child is focused on different areas. 9% said other subjects are more important, and 9% said that STEM skills are too specific. And that is usually the case when we break down the results around engineering specifically. They really feel like engineering is so specific that unless you want to be engineering, you don't need any engineering skills. And I think that's one of the key areas that that STEM initiatives need to address is really integrating, is really selling the message that it's about an integrated set of skills as opposed to just specific skills within each of those subjects. Similarly to what we did with the young people around understanding gender skews or biases towards males and females, we asked if they believe that boys or girls are more confident in certain areas. And I guess keeping with the theme of what we've been looking at, there was parents do believe that boys are more confident in engineering, technology, mathematics and science, although similar to what we saw before, the large majority sit within that grey area, believing that boys and girls are equally confident, which is fantastic. But there's a lot that can be done, and it's fantastic that we're tracking this over time, because as initiatives start to roll out, we'll kind of hope that these grey bars get bigger and bigger over time. And then moving on to teachers' career advisors in STEM. Before jumping into the actual insights, I thought it was important just to give you a little bit of a demographic breakdown of who we spoke to. So, in line with the gender distribution of teachers in Australia, the sample also skewed heavily towards female. So 85% were female, 15% were male. The majority of them were classroom teachers, so they did have that hands-on experience. 7% were career advisors in their main role, although the majority of classroom teachers did also provide a lot of career advice, so they were able to answer questions around that. There was 21% that were either in student aid, teacher aid positions or in managerial positions, and there was also a small proportion, as I mentioned before, who were educators. This study focuses on secondary teachers only, and that's because it's a little bit easier to draw a line in the sand about the subjects that they teach or don't teach, whereas in primary, it's more about specialisation in certain areas. So again, right from the onset, of all male secondary teachers, 68% of them teach STEM subjects compared to 55% of the female teachers. And what was also interesting to see is that the mix of roles that teachers have. So secondary teachers, so male teachers, for example, 42% of them teach STEM only compared to 19% of female teachers who are more likely to teach a mix of STEM and non-STEM subjects. Then moving on to the qualifications that teachers have. There overall a slight higher index amongst male teachers, 66% compared to 57%, and that was largely a result of formalised training and actually some job experience in the area. So you see the undergraduate, postgraduate certificates and career job in STEM field over-indexing amongst males. But what was encouraging is that when we asked about taking further education, so this first stat that we saw here was about education prior to starting teaching, but 91% of teachers in Australia have undertaken further STEM education to improve their knowledge. So even if they didn't have those skills up front, they've been actively, educating themselves to improve their skills. Then in terms of the key metrics that we're tracking, confidence and feelings of being qualified. So it's one thing about being qualified, it's another thing about feeling qualified and feeling confident to teach. And this is where we start to see a similar story that we've been seeing. There's a higher skew towards males feeling more confident, and that's largely because they're more focused and they're more specialised in teaching STEM, and because of the actual qualifications that they have. So we see here definitely around science skills and definitely engineering and mathematics. There's a significantly higher proportion of male teachers feeling more confident, and that translates also into the feeling qualified, and that translates to the feeling of being confident as well. What about how important do they feel it is to have STEM skills for future employment? The majority of them, this is a 5-point rating scale. We've only taken the very top results, so they're very important. So we can see here that most teachers believe that STEM skills are important, especially as we're talking in this case around secondary STEM teachers, so you'd expect that, with only small skew amongst males compared to females. What was interesting as well, even among teachers, there were some reasons that of the people that said they didn't think it was important. It's interesting to understand why, because most of my students will be engaged in lower skills professions if they're able to gain employment at all. So a bit of a sad quote there. There's no jobs in science in Australia, a male teacher said. There are many other areas of the economy where jobs exist which have no need for this whatsoever. That's from a female teacher. And I think the definition of STEM is too narrow. Engineering is not essential to an improved knowledge and system looking at the world. And that's quite consistent with what I've been talking about around engineering. Then in terms of the top 10 recommended STEM careers when focusing on career advisors, interestingly, engineer is the top profession that is recommended by career advisors for both boys and girls. But we see again this discrepancy. 70% of boys were recommended engineer jobs compared to only 50% of girls, and the recommendations for girls skew higher in terms of those medical roles, health, medical, doctor, nurse, pharmacist, and also around scientists roles. And finally, we also wanted to know some of the barriers that career advisors face around STEM careers. So what do the students actually raise? And I guess by the time we get to this slide, after going through the deck, it's not surprising that there is a lower confidence in maths, higher amongst females compared to males. Definitely low confidence in engineering. ATAR results, for those of you obviously who are not from Australia, is the results that you need to get into university. So they perceive that they're too high for STEM courses. Low confidence in science. This one here is something that I know that both the Philippines and the Australian government are trying to address, is around the lack of role models in the field, or not enough women in the field. And there's also an element, especially in Australia, around maths, to make the subject a little bit more engaging for people to increase their interest. So this was the main, I guess, insights that I wanted to share with everyone today. My email's there if you have any questions, or even if we've got some question time now. And there's also a whole set of links here if you'd like to look further into the results.
All right. Thank you so much. This was really interesting there. And if you have any handouts or slides or anything that we could share with the group as a whole, that would be terrific too. So if you send them to me, then I can just make sure that we get them sent out to everybody.
Absolutely. I've got plenty to share with everyone, so I'll make sure I send those over to you. And thank you very much for the opportunity today.
Well, you're welcome. And save the date for 2022, July 11th to the 15th. We're going to be back in Orlando, Florida in the U.S. So hopefully we can continue to pull more data.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. Thank you very much.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, everyone. We're going to go over to our closing ceremony. So I'm going to hop on over there. I look forward to seeing you there.